Welcome back to another grammar lesson. Today's lesson is on complex sentences. Now, we already talked about compound sentences. Complex and compound, similar, but still enough differences. So a complex sentence is an independent clause and a dependent clause, which we're going to call a DC, joined together. So a compound was independent clause plus an independent clause joined by a conjunction or a semicolon, but a complex sentence is an IC and a DC joined together. So how do we have those combinations? So we already talked about independent clause is a subject and a verb or a simple sentence complete thought. What is a dependent clause? There are many different kinds of dependent clauses, but today we're going to talk about dependent clauses that have a dependent clause marker plus a subject and a verb clause, but it is not a complete thought. A DC, dependent clause, is an incomplete thought. It is not a sentence by itself. So what is a DCM? This is new for some of you. A DCM is a dependent clause marker. What is a marker? This is a marker. However, we also have words that are marker words to show us that the clause itself is not a complete thought. Some common DCMs, dependent clause markers, we have when, after, because, since, if, although. Now there are many more dependent clause markers, but these are some of the common ones that you will see and use quite often. So when we put these together, there's a couple different patterns that we can use. So let's look at those patterns as well as a couple example sentences. So there are a couple of patterns that we need to know to make complex sentences. Complex sentences has two simple patterns to memorize. It's either IC, DC, period, or pattern 2, DC, comma, IC. The comma is very important when you start with a dependent clause. Now, a dependent clause, like we said, has to have a dependent clause marker. So we have one sentence here that has two different clauses. I was hungry because I didn't eat. Which one is the independent clause? Good. I was hungry. That's a complete thought. If you look at this part, because I didn't eat, is that a complete thought? No. We haven't explained anything about it yet. You're trying to tell me something happened because you didn't eat. But this is not a complete thought. I didn't eat is a complete thought, but this marker, because. So this word is our DCM. Because I didn't eat, I was hungry. And you can see that it's the exact same sentences. Number 2 pattern is DC, comma, IC. The beauty of complex sentences is that you are allowed to switch the order of the clauses and the meaning of the sentence stays the same. But if you are going to start with a dependent clause, comma, give me the rest of the thought. You need to have an IC. This is absolutely necessary. You need an independent clause if you are going to start a sentence with a dependent clause. Again, I was hungry because I didn't eat, period. Because I didn't eat, comma, what happened? I was hungry. With that in mind, let's review.
Complex sentences review. What is a complex sentence? A complex sentence is an independent clause and a dependent clause joined together. What is the difference between a dependent clause and an independent clause? An independent clause is a sentence or a complete thought. A dependent clause is an incomplete thought. What are some common dependent clause markers mentioned in the video? When, after, before, since, if, although. What are the two patterns for complex sentences mentioned in the video? IC, DC, period, and DC, comma, IC, period. What is the dependent clause marker used in the example sentences? Because. What happens to the meaning of the sentence when you switch the clauses in a complex sentence? Nothing! The meaning stays the same. What do you need to include with any sentence that starts with the word because, or any other dependent clause marker? An independent clause after the first or dependent clause.